Okay, so I'm running down here in Noank, Connecticut, and I come across this sign. So it says, aviation pioneer Amelia Earhart married George P. Putnam here in Noank, Connecticut, February 7th, 1931. What? Who knew? We're gonna have to investigate this. What's up, everybody? This is Lawrence Ryan. If you think you haven't heard that song before, you are correct. It is unreleased as of yet. I just thought it fit the occasion. It is one of mine, and I plan on releasing that hopefully within the next 6 months. So stay tuned to the channel. And I may be doing some free pre-release download codes for subscribers. So stay tuned. And on that note, if you haven't done so already, please don't forget to subscribe and or follow, hit that bell for notifications, and click on the like button. Also, leave me a comment down below. What that does is it tells the YouTube algorithm to keep the video in search and in suggested videos, places like that, so that people can see it. Very, very important for the channel. All right, today is July 2nd, 2022, and it is the 85th anniversary of the final flight and disappearance of Amelia Earhart. Very significant day. And with regard to that sign, we're going to get back to that in a minute because there's something about that that didn't make sense to me. But for now, for those unfamiliar with Amelia Earhart, a brief bio. Originally from Atchison, Kansas, Amelia was a child who was said to be gifted with a spirit of adventure. Known for climbing trees, hunting down rats with a rifle, and launching herself in her sled off the roof of the family shed. Her fascination with aviation began in her early 20s after a 10-minute plane ride in Long Beach, California in 1920. A fascination which would soon turn into a lifelong passion. She got her international pilot's license in 1923, and over the next 10 years, she'd set a world altitude record of 14,000 feet. She'd become the first woman in the world to fly with a group across the Atlantic, making the trip in 20 hours and 40 minutes, in a Fokker F-7 named Friendship. She'd set the world's flying speed record of 181.18 miles per hour, as well as 6 other speed and distance records. She set the women's autogyro altitude record of 18,415 feet in 1931, and in August 1932, in a Lockheed Vega 5B, she became the first woman to fly nonstop across the United States, coast to coast, Los Angeles to Newark, breaking the previous U.S. speed record. Amazing. Just amazing, and that's not all. Also in 1932, she became the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic. She was awarded the Gold Medal of the National Geographic Society presented by President Hoover, the Harmon Trophy as America's Outstanding Airwoman, and the Army Air Corps' Distinguished Flying Cross. She was also elected president of the 99s, a women's pilot association advancing the cause of women in aviation, and
in 1935, Amelia Earhart flies her Lockheed from Honolulu to Oakland. She is the first woman to make a solo flight over the Pacific, covering the distance in 18 hours, 16 minutes. The crowd hails her for an outstanding performance.
But her fate would forever change in 1937. On May 31st of that year, she took off from Oakland, California,
in a Lockheed Model 10 Electra with her navigator, a man named Fred Noonan, on a trip that would make her the first woman to circumnavigate the Earth by plane. The journey took her across the U.S., down to South America, across the South Atlantic to Africa, across the continent to Asia, and onto Australia. From there, she traveled to Lae, New Guinea, the location from which she planned to make one of the final and arguably most challenging legs of the trip across the Pacific and back to the U.S. But according to the U.S. Navy, on July 2, 1937, roughly 20 hours after taking off from Lae for Howland Island, a refueling point, Earhart's plane vanished.
Okay, so according to the U.S. Navy that oversaw the search, Earhart was unable to receive certain radio communications from this ship. This is called the Itasca. This was a Coast Guard cutter that was apparently stationed at Howland Island on that day specifically to guide Earhart in. Now, the ship was equipped with all the latest radio equipment and direction-finding equipment, as was Earhart's plane, and the island as well. But according to the Navy, the official story is that despite the presence of a fully equipped military vessel and all that equipment, these two very experienced pilots and navigators simply could not find the island or the ship or anything remotely like it. They ran out of gas and fell in the ocean. Now, if that seems even slightly strange to you, it gets even stranger when you find out that supposedly Earhart had communicated with the Itasca multiple times during her flight by radio. And conveniently enough, there's a transcript of it. And that transcript can be found in the National Archives. I found it there, and here it is.
Okay, so let's trace the timeline here. According to this document, at 6:15 a.m., Earhart reported that she was 200 miles out. At 6:45, reported 100 miles out, she asked Itasca to take a bearing on her signals. At 7:42, she said, "We must be on you but cannot see you, but gas is running low, been unable to reach you by radio, we are flying at 1,000 feet. At 7:49, she apparently says, "We are circling but cannot hear you." At 7:58, it says that she asked Itasca to send signals so that she could take a bearing using her radio direction finder, and Itasca complied. At 7:59, she apparently reported, "We received your signals but unable to get a minimum. Please take bearing on us and answer on 3105 with voice." At 8:43, Earhart apparently said, "We are on the line 157-337. That's a compass heading, not a location. We'll repeat this message on 6210 kilocycles. Wait." And there is apparently one more message. There was some debate at the time as to exactly when that message came in. The log says it came in at 8:44, but the current understanding is that it actually came in at 8:55. So apparently at that time, Earhart had said, "We are running online north and south." That is apparently the last message, and according to the official story, the last anyone has ever heard from Amelia Earhart.
Okay, so you probably noticed that there seems to be some things missing from that radio log. And in my opinion, some things just don't make sense with regard to the disappearance story. Number one, there's no Mayday call. That's a standard international distress procedure on ships and planes, a Mayday call, and she never made one, or there isn't one in the log. Number two, at no time does she ever give a specific position, a location where she is. She never gives a location. She has one of the best, if not the best, navigators in the world on the plane, Fred Noonan, and they don't even give an estimated position the entire time. Number three, and this is according to one of the researchers, Mike Campbell, who I'll talk about in a minute. On a podcast, he said that in none of her messages does she ever stay on the air longer than 8 to 10 seconds, which is not enough time for anyone to ever get a fix on her position. So that's kind of strange. And number four was about the message at 7:42, where she says she's running low on gas. So I looked up the spec on her plane.
This was a custom Lockheed Electra Model 10E with two 600-horsepower Pratt & Whitney engines designed to fly long distances and had a maximum flight range of 4,100 to 4,500 miles, nonstop. And that is directly from the Lockheed report from 1936.
And, in addition to the onboard fuel tanks, in the days before she took off from Lae for Howland in New Guinea, they added an additional fuel tank, which did increase the weight, but likely increased the maximum range of the plane. Howland Island is only 2,200 nautical miles, or 2,556 standard miles, from her takeoff point in Lae, New Guinea. So why would Earhart say at 7:42 that she's running low on gas when she had only gone roughly half the maximum range of her plane? Maybe not even half, because she had extra fuel. Leaky gas tanks? Maybe. Or maybe the disappearance story was what we were supposed to be told in the event that she never made it back from where she was really going. Was she going to Howland Island? I think so. The Itasca was there. That was the destination. But was she going there first? Maybe not. This is what I mean by that. Take a look at this.
This is what I refer to as the Pacific Detour Theory. These islands, known as the Marshall Islands, which are roughly 4 hours northwest of Howland by plane, were under Japanese control at the time of Earhart's flight. And tensions between the United States and Japan had been slowly building throughout the decade. The Japanese had attacked China in 1931 and were annexing Chinese areas for resources and land. And while the U.S. wanted to maintain peace with Japan, the war was very unpopular and became of increasing concern. And don't forget, 4 years after Earhart's disappearance, the Japanese would attack Pearl Harbor.
So clearly, by 1937, Japanese military positions in the Pacific were of great interest to the United States and the Roosevelt administration. So what if Earhart was tasked with flying a slightly different route on her trip? Maybe get some photographs and then head to Howland. Reconnaissance. Crazy, you say? This information I found about pre-World War II intelligence might shed some light on that idea.
The years immediately before the United States entered World War II saw American interest in developments in the Pacific intensify dramatically, prompting both formal and informal efforts to gather and analyze information. President Franklin Roosevelt relied heavily on American and British friends traveling abroad to provide him with intelligence on the intentions of other leaders.
And Earhart happened to be well acquainted with President Roosevelt. She spent quite a bit of time at the White House. She corresponded with him regarding flights and was very good friends with his wife, Eleanor. Okay, so you say, Lawrence, there were lots of islands in the Pacific under Japanese control at that time. Why the Marshall Islands? Great question. I mention them first because of the proximity to Lae, New Guinea. They're pretty close. And second, because according to several researchers, multiple eyewitness accounts from people living on this atoll at the time, which is called Mili Atoll in the Marshall Islands, recall the crash landing of a silver plane flown by a woman and a man. Here's one of those accounts.
2 Mili fishermen on Bar Island, Mili Atoll, Lijon and Jororo Alabar, saw a silver plane approach and crash land on a nearby reef, breaking off part of its right wing. The two Marshallese hid in the underbrush and watched as 2 white people exited the wreck and came ashore in a yellow raft. Quote, yellow boat which grew, unquote. A little while later, Japanese soldiers arrived to take hold of the flyers. When the shorter flyer screamed, the Marshallese realized one was a woman. They remained hidden until long after the captives were taken away.
And it was also relayed that the plane was recovered by a Japanese ship known as the Koshu. Another eyewitness was a man named Bilamon Amaron. Now, Amaran was apparently a young medical corpsman working at the time under the Japanese on Jaluit Island in the Marshall Islands, which is just west of Mili Atoll. And according to researchers Joe Gervais and Bill Primack, who in 1989 traveled to the Marshalls to hear Amaran's eyewitness account, this is what Amaran said.
In July 1937, I was residing on Jaluit, site of major Japanese naval base, working as 16-year-old medical corpsman for Naval Hospital. One day at mid-morning, Japanese Navy tender ship comes to harbor and the chief naval doctor takes me on board the ship. Crew and officers were in naval uniforms. Sitting in deck chair was American woman, and sitting on hatch cover was thin American man with wounds. Japanese officer then take me rear of ship and show me their airplane, silver, 2 motors, with left wing broken. Crew called lady Melia. She dressed in dark skirt, white blouse, and kerchief around her neck. American man, blue eyes, thin mustache, skinny, both very tired but in good health. Japanese officer tell me, ship go to Saipan.
Pretty interesting stuff. And by the way, if you want to read more about Amaran's account and the disappearance of Amelia Earhart in general, check out this book by Mike Campbell. A lot of great information in there. I'll put a link to it down below. So, multiple eyewitnesses make the Marshall Islands a place of interest here. And if you take a look at the map,
you can see that the alternate route is entirely doable. If you start at Lae in New Guinea, fly to the Marshall Islands, Mili Atoll, and then go on to Howland, the distance it shows is still only around 2,800 miles, well under the maximum flight range, 4,500 miles, of Earhart's plane. So on paper, that's a feasible trip, barring any unforeseen circumstances.
Okay, so more evidence on this. I decided to check further into the National Archives, which does seem to have some pertinent documents on the Earhart disappearance that have been declassified. I also looked through the work of some of the Earhart researchers.
This document, which was found in the archives initially by researcher Les Kinney, is a Japanese communique dated July 5, 1937, just 3 days after Earhart and Noonan disappeared. It was initially written in Japanese diplomatic code, but decrypted by the U.S. Navy. And this is from Oimatsu in Tokyo to the Japanese naval attaché in Washington. And it says, "We are in receipt of intelligence reports to the effect that the United States Navy is launching upon a large-scale search for the lost Miss Earhart. Since it is believed that she went down in the vicinity of the Marshall Islands area, the government of the South Sea Islands has ordered all ships, lookouts, and communication facilities to cooperate in the discovering of her. We have communicated our desire to assist in this search through our ambassador in Washington to the U.S. government. This offer was made not only as an expression of goodwill, but for the purpose of preventing the United States merchant and fighting vessels, which are searching for Miss Earhart, from coming too close to the Marshall Islands."
So where did the Japanese get that information? It certainly wasn't from the United States, because that was restricted airspace, and our presence there at the time certainly would have been considered spying. My guess is that information came from someone in the Marshall Islands. Maybe Mili Atoll. The History Channel had a very interesting take on that communique in their documentary.
This implies that the Japanese were most likely tracking Earhart's flight and had a much better idea as to where she had actually crashed. The fact that they, the communiques, were housed at the National Archives also implies that the United States may have had knowledge of Earhart's capture by the Japanese, but have kept information about her true fate classified for 80 years.
The next piece of information I found was from a post in the National Archives by Dr. Greg Bradsher, senior archivist at the NAR facility in College Park, and that says,
"The second secretary of the Japanese embassy, Tsuneo Hayama, telephoned William T. Turner of the Division of Far Eastern Affairs on July 6, 1937, that the naval attaché of the Japanese embassy had been informed that the Japanese Navy Department had instructed the survey ship Koshu, which was then somewhere in the South Seas, to take part in the search for Earhart's airplane.
So what do we have so far? We know that the Japanese believed or had information that Earhart may have gone down in the Marshall Islands. We also know that the Japanese Navy had dispatched the survey ship Koshu to search for her, the same ship the eyewitnesses on Amelia Atoll said they saw recovering a plane, the same ship upon which Amaran said he had treated Earhart and Noonan. Very interesting.
This document I found was in the National Archives under the Office of Naval Intelligence, and it is from William D. Leahy, the acting Secretary of the U.S. Navy at the time, to United States Senator Gerald P. Nye, and it was sent on January 19, 1938, regarding Earhart. And it says, "My dear Senator Nyes, acknowledging your letter of January 17, 1938, with photostat enclosure, I wish to thank you for the information presented. I am pleased to inform you that the reports and records, including detailed track charts of the Earhart search conducted by the United States Navy and the United States Coast Guard in July 1937, show that no vessels or planes approached the vicinity of any islands under Japanese sovereignty or mandate, and that no, quote, findings of any nature regarding Japanese domain or activities were submitted in connection with that search." And it goes on to say, "In view of the foregoing, it is evident that there can be no possibility that, quote, alleged findings were shared with the British Navy."
So this confirms that the U.S. did not go to the Marshall Islands to look for Earhart, even though they may have had the information that the Japanese believed she was there. The U.S. did not act on it. Now, that may have been to maintain deniability, or to avoid stirring the pot with a country that was already at war with China, or to avoid revealing that the U.S. had broken the Japanese military and diplomatic codes, which we had, or perhaps all of the above. One of the most compelling pieces of information in this case was from April 26, 1938. A man named Paul Mance, a famous stunt pilot and technical advisor for Amelia Earhart, wrote to Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt and asked that she use her influence to obtain for him the official report of the Itasca relating to the flight of Amelia Earhart, the last flight. Mance had tried unsuccessfully to get the information from the Coast Guard. Mrs. Roosevelt sent the Mance letter to this man. His name was Henry Morgenthau. Morgenthau was the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury at the time, which also at the time oversaw, you guessed it, the Coast Guard. Morgenthau called Mrs. Roosevelt back and got her secretary. His side of that conversation was preserved in a dictaphone recording located in the FDR Library in Hyde Park. And here's part of it.
"Yes, I mean, if we give this to one man, we've got to make it public. We can't let one man see it. And if we ever release the report of the Itasca on Amelia Earhart, any reputation she's got is gone. Because, and I'd really like to return this to you. Now, I know what the Navy did, and I know what the Itasca did, and I know how Amelia Earhart absolutely disregarded all orders. And if we ever release this thing, goodbye Amelia Earhart's reputation. Now, really, because if we give the access to one, we have to give it to all. And my advice is that. And if the President ever heard that somebody questioned that the Navy hadn't made the proper search after what those boys went through..."
Okay, so it's clear from that recording that Morgenthau had information on Earhart and her flight that he was not interested in releasing to the public. And that was almost a year later. That was 1938 when that recording was made. And orders? He mentions Earhart didn't obey orders. What orders did she have? I mean, that indicates there was some kind of instruction or a mission. And why, when Paul Mance, who was just looking for information on the flight, he was looking for the Itasca report, was Morgenthau so concerned that someone was going to be questioning whether the Navy had made the proper search? Not a proper search, the proper search. As if there's a specific one that was to be made, right? Well, Maybe because Morgenthau had the information that Earhart had gone down in the Marshall Islands. And the release of that information would have brought up the question of why the Navy and the Coast Guard hadn't searched that area, maybe with the cooperation of the Japanese Navy or something like that. And if the public found out that the U.S. had information about where Earhart went down and did nothing to save her, i.e., the proper search, it probably would have destroyed Morgenthau's career and permanently tainted the reputation and legacy of FDR. And that's enough to make any politician want to take it all in a box and lock it away. And apparently that's exactly what happened, because with the exception of that recording in Hyde Park, none of the files that Morgenthau had on Earhart, and apparently there are quite a few, none of those files have ever been released. They're still classified to this day. All right, one more interesting piece of this puzzle came from the government of the Marshall Islands itself. The islands became independent in 1979, and in 1987, on the 50th anniversary of the disappearance of Amelia Earhart, the Republic of the Marshall Islands issued these. These are 4 commemorative stamps in honor of Amelia Earhart's landing in the Marshall Islands.
The first stamp depicts Earhart's takeoff from Lae, New Guinea. The second shows the Itasca waiting at Howland Island. The third shows Earhart's plane crashed off the shore of Amelia Atoll and the 2 flyers exiting to a yellow life raft. And the fourth shows Earhart and Noonan on the shore. Noonan appears to have a bandage on his leg, and they're standing with a Japanese soldier as the plane is towed away by a ship that is described on the stamp as the Koshu.
Okay, so to be clear, the stamps don't prove anything in particular, but they do underscore the fact of how confident the Republic of the Marshall Islands is that Earhart's plane went down there. And that's probably because of all of the eyewitness accounts. And from what I've read, there's been pretty decent corroboration between those witnesses. And I also read that it was confirmed that a yellow life raft, like the one depicted in one of the stamps, was indeed part of the inventory on Earhart's plane. So what do you think? Leaky gas tanks, really strong headwinds, or a detour? Leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you think. I think, to be absolutely sure, there always has to be hard evidence. In this case, that would mean a 38-foot-long aluminum airplane, or parts of it. It's out there, folks, somewhere. And I do hope we find it. But meanwhile, the growing amount of documented evidence in this case seems to indicate that there's a whole lot more to the story than we've been told. Okay, so back to our sign. The first question is it accurate? Did Amelia Earhart really spend time in this little New England town called Nowak, and was she married there? The sign also has a small anomaly, which brings up a second question. Why is the word here in the sign painted white when all of the other words on the sign are black? The theory I have about that is that when they hung the sign, they realized that the word here might make people think it was that specific location, when in reality, Earhart was married in a different part of town, a different neighborhood, or as town lines change, maybe a different town altogether. Hard to know. But let's answer the first question first. Is it accurate? There's no way to know if someone spent time in a particular place, but if somebody gets married in a particular place, there has to be a public record of it. So, next stop, Town Hall. All right, so here I am at the town hall in Groton, Connecticut. Last time I was here, it was closed for COVID. I don't know if it is now, but if it is open, I will need to wear a mask, so I'm masking up. Mask is ready. Just got to grab a tripod, and I'm in. They are open. I think I gotta go there. To the town clerk's office. Yes I do. How are you? I thought you were busy. I am shooting a video, and I was down in Noank, and I saw a sign. I'm shooting a video about Amelia Earhart. I saw a sign down there that said she was married in Noank.
She was.
And I just wanted to see if there's any confirmation about that, like any kind of documentation.
Yeah, her marriage certificate is here.
Email
Is
it
there-
afterwards?
Is there any way I could see that?
Because
After.
killing me. Why is it
I'm sorry.
email?
You found it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my.
There she
Look
is.
at that.
She had a beautiful signature.
I'm going to see if I get a video of this here. Maybe get a picture. That is the
I'm
official.
not sure if you're allowed to do that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you can
You're-
always pay for a copy.
Yeah.
I can't. Can I just look at it then? I won't.
You can look at it.
All right. I won't take a picture. So it is confirmed. Amelia Mary Earhart did spend time in Noank, Connecticut, and she was married there. I just saw the certificate. They booted me out right at 4:30 and would not let me take a picture of it. I don't know why. It's a public document. I don't know why they wouldn't let me take a picture. Anyway, the next step, the location. If it still exists, I will find it. Okay, so I did find online the location of Amelia Earhart's nuptials. She was indeed married in this town. And there was actually a picture of a house. It was a white house. And Amelia Earhart talked about a square house in some of her writings. And we're going to go see if it's still there. I'm on my way now. This is the street. Let's see if the house is there. Well, I got to the location, and the house is still here. That is it. Apparently that is the square house. Looks like it's got a shed in the back of some kind. Some scaffolding on the front. They're doing some work to it. I'm standing where Amelia Earhart was. Very cool. Okay, I'm heading back now. Someone came out and said that the owner of the house is a very private person, so I don't want to overstay my welcome. Hopefully the footage came out, but wow, it is still there. It's still there. Unbelievable. All right, that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Once again, please don't forget to subscribe and or follow. Click on the like button and leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you think of the Pacific Detour theory. Or if you have a theory or some ideas of your own, put them in the comments and we'll talk about them. I will leave you with some music and some footage of the Noank area. This is Lawrence Ryan signing off for the Rebel Tunnel. Stay safe, and I'll see you on the other side.